We don't serve freeloaders. My daughter-in-law said that, right in the middle of my son's birthday party, in that penthouse, overlooking Central Park. My wife was standing there, holding the cake she baked with her own hands. Caleb was less than 2 meters away. He heard it, and he said nothing. I spent 30 years designing jet engines, and somehow I failed to teach my own son what gratitude means. What Chloe didn't know was that the man she called a freeloader was the one holding the key to that entire room. If you're listening to this story somewhere in the world, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I've always believed every one of us carries a story behind our silence. And that night, in the penthouse overlooking Central Park, my story was only just beginning. That penthouse was so bright that night, I felt like nothing could hide. Floor-to-ceiling glass reflected the chandelier and the thin champagne flutes in every guest's hand. Beyond the windows, Central Park lay quiet, darker, almost like another world that had nothing to do with this one. Tara and I arrived 10 minutes early. She wore her dark blue dress, the one she had the sleeves altered on last year. I wore my old ash gray suit, the same one I used to wear to engineering board meetings before I retired. We didn't stand out, and maybe, in some eyes, we weren't supposed to be there at all. Caleb came out after a staff member announced we had arrived. He gave me a light hug, the kind a busy man gives, not a son. With Tara, he just touched her shoulder. "Glad you could make it," he said, his eyes already drifting back to a group of partners near the window. Tara smiled. She always smiles first, as if gentleness can fill any silence. The cake she brought was carefully wrapped in a white box. Apple cinnamon, the kind Caleb used to ask for every birthday when he still lived at home. I told her they surely had a custom cake ordered from some famous patisserie in Manhattan. She only said, "He still likes mine." I knew she didn't mean the flavor. She meant the memory. About 20 minutes later, when the room was full, Tara found a small corner table near the open kitchen and set the box down. Chloe saw her. She walked over faster than necessary. Her heels struck the marble floor. Steady, deliberate. I was close enough to hear. "What's this?" she asked. Not really a question. "A cake for Caleb," Tara said gently. "I made it this afternoon." Chloe opened the box. Her eyes swept over the neatly layered apples on top. She gave a small laugh. Not a happy one. "We already ordered a cake from a patisserie on the Upper East Side. There's a certain standard here." She turned to a server. "Take this downstairs. Don't let it appear on the table," Tara said softly. "It's all right. I just thought he might like it." Chloe didn't look at her. "We don't serve personal items like that here. Everything has to fit the image. The image." I heard that word clearly. I used to work in an industry where a product's image could determine contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But I had never seen anyone use image to erase sincerity. Tara pulled her hands back as the server carried the box away. She didn't stop him, didn't argue. She just stood there, a second longer than usual. I stepped beside her. "It's fine," she said before I could speak. But I knew it wasn't. The music shifted to a faster rhythm. The laughter grew thicker. Caleb was already raising his glass with his partners. He talked about a new marketing campaign, about growth speed, about the different mindset of our generation. Our generation. I'd heard that phrase at recent family dinners, as if there were an invisible line between us. On one side, the past. On the other, the present. And the past should quietly step aside. When Tara moved toward Caleb to give him his gift, Chloe stepped in front of her. She smiled at the guests behind her, then lowered her voice just enough for those nearby to hear. "We don't serve freeloaders. This is a place for people who create value." I had heard the words before, but hearing them again, in that polished room, they felt heavier. Tara straightened her back. She didn't bow her head, didn't step back. She simply looked at Chloe with a calmness that even surprised me. Caleb lifted his champagne flute and clinked it with a man in an expensive black suit. He turned his face away. I couldn't tell if that was avoidance or a choice. In that moment, I saw a simple paradox. This penthouse had been built on decisions Tara and I made quietly many years ago. Yet in this room, we were treated like uninvited guests. A few people nearby began whispering. No one intervened. In Manhattan, people usually side with whoever controls the room. I placed my hand on Tara's back. She was steady, no trembling, no rush. "I'm all right," she whispered. I looked around. The paintings on the walls, the Italian leather sofas, the custom-built bar. Everything spoke of success. But I wondered, how many people here knew where the true foundation of that success began? There was something in the way Chloe looked at us that told me, this wasn't just about a cake. I spent my life reading technical blueprints. When I studied a structure, I always looked for the main load-bearing point. Once you understand that, you understand the entire system. That night, I began to ask myself, if the real source of support were quietly removed, would any of this still stand? Tara tightened her grip on her old purse, a purse Chloe would probably call outdated. I knew what was inside wasn't just money. And I also knew this party, with all its lights and laughter, was about to enter a different phase. Just not yet. I learned something in all my years as an engineer. When a system runs too smoothly, it usually means someone has been covering the cracks underneath. That night, between the music and the congratulations, I started to see those cracks. Tara stood beside me. She wasn't looking at Caleb anymore. Her eyes moved quietly across the room, the way she used to observe her classroom. Not to judge, just to understand. I found myself thinking back 10 years. When Caleb called and said he wanted to stand on his own feet in New York, he had a bold marketing idea. A few friends willing to join him, but no capital. The bank declined. Too risky. Venture funds wanted controlling equity. That night, Tara was the one who asked me to take my old patent files out of the safe. 30 years of research on fuel-efficient engines. Some of those patents still held commercial value. I had planned to keep them as part of my legacy. But when your son says he needs a chance, legacy becomes negotiable. I leveraged them as collateral. We never told Caleb the full amount. We simply said, Mom and Dad have some savings. That some savings was enough for the down payment on this penthouse, and enough to fund his company's first 2 years of operation. I never mentioned it again over the past decade, not because I forgot, but because I believed that one day he would understand on his own. Maybe I was wrong. A group near the bar was discussing Caleb's plan to expand to the West Coast. A silver-haired man said quietly, if the next funding round falls through, they'll have to restructure. Restructure, a polite word for shrinking. I caught fragments of conversation. Cash flow was tight. Spending on image had exceeded projections. They believed that with their current social standing, investors would keep pouring money in. I looked at Caleb. He was laughing loudly, shoulders straight, eyes confident. He didn't know that most of his current credit line didn't come from investors, but from a secured account under Tara's name. The family trust was set up after I sold part of the licensing rights to my patents. Tara was the primary beneficiary. Caleb was only an authorized dependent user, with specific conditions. The trust retained the right to review or withdraw support in cases of serious financial risk or irresponsible conduct. That clause was my idea. At the time, I thought I was simply being cautious. I never imagined I might have to use it. A sharper-than-usual laugh cut through my thoughts. Chloe was telling her friends about their future plans for the parents. We're looking for somewhere quieter for them, she said lightly, as if discussing a vacation. In another state, more affordable. Older people need simpler environments. A woman asked, do they agree? Chloe shrugged. At that age, they don't need too many choices. I didn't turn to look at Tara. I was afraid if I did, I might see something in her eyes that would shake my calm. But she heard. She gently opened her purse. The movement was small. No one noticed, except me. Inside that old purse was a slim black card. No flashy logo, just a subtle engraving. Centurion. Cardholder name, Tara Whitmore. Chloe had often shown off her own exclusive card to friends, but hers was only a supplementary card, linked to a corporate account. Tara had never used hers here. She didn't pull it out immediately. She simply let her fingers rest against its edge, as if confirming it was still there. I understood that gesture. Not to boast, not to retaliate, but to remind herself that her worth did not depend on what someone had just said. I walked slowly to the bar and asked for a glass of water. The bartender looked at me a little longer than usual. You're... he began. I'm the host's father, I said. He nodded, but his expression shifted slightly. Then I remembered the building manager here had once worked on an airport renovation project I consulted on years ago. The world isn't as large as people think. Back beside Tara, I asked softly, Did you hear what they said? She nodded. I did. How do you feel? She looked toward the glass wall where city lights shimmered in reflection. Do you remember when Caleb lost that scholarship? She asked. I remembered. He stayed in his room for 2 days. Wouldn't eat. I didn't want him to feel abandoned, she said. But maybe we've been blocking the wind for him too long. There was no bitterness in her voice, just recognition. I looked around the room again. Everything still looked magnificent. But now I could see the dependency beneath the surface. If the trust were reviewed, if the credit line were frozen, if the secured account were withdrawn, how many lights in this room would remain on? Just then, Caleb stepped onto the small platform near the electric fireplace, preparing to speak. Chloe stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. A perfect picture. Tara exhaled softly. Then she pulled the black card from her purse. The chandelier light reflected across its surface, only for a brief moment. But I saw Chloe's eyes shift when she glanced over. The smile on her lips paused. Not gone, but disrupted. Like music missing a beat. Some people recognize power the moment they see it, even when it isn't displayed. I placed my hand on Tara's shoulder. Maybe, I said quietly, the real party is just beginning. Caleb began his speech with numbers. Double-digit growth, expanding market share, familiar phrases I used to hear in board meetings. The crowd applauded on cue. Chloe stood beside him, confident, as if everything in that room had been arranged to her liking. But I knew not everything was under their control. Tara still held the black card in her hand. She didn't raise it, didn't display it. She simply turned it gently between her fingers, like someone thinking. I leaned closer. What do you want to do? Not make a scene, she said softly. Just put things back where they belong. The way she said where they belong, I knew she had made up her mind. Caleb ended his speech by thanking those who believed and stood with us. He didn't mention us. I wasn't surprised. I simply noted it. Moments later, Chloe walked to the bar and asked them to open another special bottle of champagne. No limits tonight, she said loudly, making sure a few guests heard. The server smiled professionally and brought out the wireless payment device. Chloe handed over her card. A very small pause. The machine made a dry sound. Transaction declined. Chloe frowned. Try again. The server did. Same result. I saw Caleb turn back. His smile faded. Is there a problem? Probably the network, Chloe said quickly, but her eyes were no longer steady. Tara stepped forward, not rushing, not interrupting. Let me, she said gently. Chloe turned irritation and caution mixed together. That's not necessary. Tara didn't argue. She simply handed her black card to the server. I watched Chloe's face as the server took it. That wasn't ordinary curiosity. That was recognition. The machine approved the transaction almost instantly. The server gave a slight bow. Thank you, ma'am. A few nearby guests began to notice. Not because of the amount, but because something invisible had shifted in the air. Chloe forced a smile. Must have been a technical issue. I decided it was time for more than a transaction. I walked toward the building manager near the entrance. He recognized me before I spoke. Mr. Whitmore, he nodded. It's been a while. It has, I said. I need to confirm a few details regarding the lease on this unit. He understood immediately this wasn't small talk. We stepped aside. The penthouse lease had been signed under a legal entity, backed by the family trust. Caleb was the authorized occupant. An addendum allowed the guarantor to review usage rights in case of financial risk or structural asset changes. I didn't demand anything on the spot. I simply asked him to prepare the original documents and contact the building's legal department in the morning. When I returned, Chloe was speaking sharply to Caleb. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the tension in their gestures. Caleb approached me. Dad, what are you doing? I'm just speaking with management, I replied calmly. About what? About the occupancy rights to this apartment. Chloe stepped in. This is our home. I looked at her. Not entirely. A few guests began drifting toward the exit. Rumors travel faster than music. People can ignore a homemade cake being removed. They don't ignore a declined transaction at a luxury party. Tara stood tall in the center of the room. She said little, just watched. Caleb lowered his voice. What do you want? I didn't answer immediately. I had waited years to say this clearly. You think you're flying high, I said slowly, but you forgot who supplies the fuel for those wings. Chloe reacted first. Are you threatening us? No, I said. I'm reminding you of the actual structure. Caleb's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. His expression changed. I assumed it was the bank. The trust had automatically triggered a review clause when the credit line exceeded safe thresholds last quarter. A temporary partial freeze on the secured account had been issued earlier that afternoon. I knew because my attorney keeps me informed. I didn't need to do anything dramatic. The system was simply operating as designed. This can't be happening, Caleb murmured, almost to himself. Why not? I asked gently. You planned our future without asking us. We're just reviewing ours. Chloe looked at Tara. You can't do this. Tara answered calmly. I'm not doing anything. I'm only reviewing what belongs to me. The room was no longer a party. It had become a place of waiting to see what might fall next. I looked at Caleb. For the first time that night, there was something different in his eyes. Not confidence. Doubt. Dad, he said quietly. Can we talk privately? I nodded. But before we could step away, the elevator doors opened behind us. I had told my attorney to come only if necessary. Perhaps it was necessary now. The elevator doors opened softly. No drama, but the sound was enough to make a few guests turn. 2 attorneys stepped out. I had known them for years. They didn't carry tension, only slim leather folders neatly closed. Caleb looked at me. Dad, you called them? I asked them to be available if certain matters needed clarification, I said. Tonight, it seems they do. The air in the room shifted. The music was still playing, but no one was listening anymore. Mr. Harris, the senior attorney, stepped toward me. He didn't look at Caleb first. He looked at me, waiting for final confirmation. I nodded. He opened the folder. Under Addendum Number 3 of the Whitmore Family Trust, he said, evenly, the guarantor reserves the right to suspend or withdraw financial backing in the event of serious risk or conduct detrimental to shared assets. Chloe cut in. This is a party. What are you even talking about? Harris didn't react to her tone. A review notice was issued earlier. Tonight we are here to deliver formal documentation terminating the trust's guarantee on this residential agreement. Caleb stepped back, half a pace. Terminate. What does that mean? I answered for him. It means this penthouse is no longer backed by the trust. Your right to occupy it will conclude under the terms you signed. Chloe shook her head. That's impossible. We've invested in this place. Our reputation. Reputation, I repeated calmly, does not replace legal structure. Harris handed the documents to Caleb. You have 24 hours to arrange transition and return control of the property. You can't do this to your own son, Caleb said. For the first time that night, I heard real fear in his voice. I'm not doing anything, I told him. I'm only withdrawing what was never yours. Silence spread across the room. A few more guests slipped out. No one wants to stand too close to a structure losing its foundation. Chloe turned to Caleb, her voice low and urgent. Say something. This is our shared asset. Caleb flipped through the pages quickly, as if hoping to find a technical escape. I know that feeling. When a system is failing, people look for a loose bolt to blame. But sometimes, the flaw is in the design. What do you want? Caleb asked me. An apology, I thought for a moment. I want you to understand. Understand what that independence doesn't begin by denying where you came from. Chloe let out a short laugh. You're turning this into some moral lesson. I didn't answer her. I looked at my son. Do you know what Chloe said tonight? About relocating us, I asked. Caleb blinked. Relocating? What are you talking about? Chloe turned sharply. I was discussing a better option for them. Better for who, I asked. Caleb looked at her, then at me. Another crack. You said we needed to free up suburban assets to reinvest, Chloe said quickly. I said consider it, Caleb replied. Not decide. So now you're blaming me, she snapped, her composure slipping. I remained still. I didn't need to intervene. Truth has a way of moving on its own. Under pressure, Chloe spoke faster. Careless. If I hadn't pushed you, you'd still be a mid-level executive. I built your image. I arranged everything. And arranged an exit plan for yourself, I asked quietly. Her eyes sharpened. What are you implying I'm not implying? I said. I received an audit report. There have been personal transfers into a separate account, funds unrelated to company operations. Caleb looked at her. What account? She hesitated. Too long to be nothing. That's a reserve fund, she said, in case things go wrong. In case of what Caleb asked. In case you're not strong enough to hold it together, she replied, almost without thinking. The room went completely still. I didn't feel satisfaction, only a cold confirmation that my concerns hadn't been imagined. Caleb sank onto the edge of the sofa, hands in his hair. The confident executive was gone. In front of me was just a young man realizing the ground beneath him wasn't as solid as he believed. Dad, he said more quietly, is there any way to fix this? I took my time before answering. Yes, I said, but not with money. Chloe gave a faint, bitter smile. You think an apology solves this? No, I replied. Real change does. And real change doesn't begin in this penthouse. Harris closed the folder. We'll coordinate with management to complete the process tomorrow. I nodded. Tara stepped beside me. She didn't speak to Caleb or Chloe. She simply looked at them once more. No anger, no contempt, just the gaze of someone who fully understands her own worth. I turned to my son. I'm not closing the door on your life, I said slowly. I'm only closing the door you thought was yours. Then I took Tara's hand. Let's go home, she said softly. And this time, I didn't look back. The elevator doors closed behind us. The sound wasn't loud, but it felt like a period at the end of a long sentence. Tara still held my hand. Her palm was warm, steady. I watched the numbers on the panel decrease, from the top floor down to ground level. I've spent a lifetime managing controlled descents. What matters isn't how fast you come down. It's whether you keep your balance. When the doors opened into the main lobby, New York City was moving as if nothing had happened. Cars passed. Traffic lights changed. People hurried toward the subway. No one knew that high above them, ownership of a structure had just shifted. We stepped outside. Neither of us spoke for the first few minutes. Finally, Tara asked, Do you feel lighter? I thought about it. I feel clearer. She nodded. Me too. The next morning, the paperwork moved quickly. The trust formally withdrew its guarantee. The penthouse was placed into transfer under previously signed provisions. No public dispute, no shouting, just signatures, and accounts adjusted. Caleb called twice that day. I didn't answer right away, not to punish him, but because any conversation then would have been ruled by panic. That evening I called back. His voice was lower than usual. Dad, I read all the documents. I know. I didn't realize how much depended on it. You didn't ask. Silence. I was wrong, he said at last. I didn't respond immediately. I waited to see whether that sentence carried weight or reflex. I thought independence meant separating from you and Mom, he continued. But I was just standing on the foundation you built. I heard him exhale. Not the sound of someone who lost property. The sound of someone who lost an illusion. Chloe left, he added. I wasn't surprised. Relationships built on advantage rarely survive when the advantage shifts. I'll find a smaller place, Caleb said, and restructure the company myself. If there's still a chance, there's always a chance, I told him. But this time, you supply your own fuel. We didn't talk about the penthouse again. A month later, the transfer was complete. The recovered funds from the property and liquidated shares did not return to my account, or Tara's. We sat with our attorneys and signed a different set of papers. The Whitmore Education Fund was established. Its purpose supports students with engineering talent who lack financial means. No publicity campaign, no buildings named after us, just scholarships. Small laboratories equipped properly. Opportunities that might otherwise be missed. Tara added one more clause. Every scholarship recipient would be paired with a mentor in the field. Not just money, but direction. I agreed. That's real investment, she said. We returned to our old house in the suburbs. The wooden porch faded with time, maple trees in the yard turning red each autumn. In the afternoons, I sit in my usual chair and watch Tara water the plants. No crystal chandeliers, no floor-to-ceiling glass, but a quiet I had almost forgotten. Caleb came to visit 2 weeks later, alone. He sat across from us without gifts, without long explanations. I want to start over, he said. Tara poured him tea, the way she had for years. I looked at my son, not a marketing executive, not the owner of a penthouse. Just a man learning again what value means. There's nothing wrong with starting over, I told him. As long as you understand why you're starting. He nodded. We never spoke about that night again. There was no need. Some events aren't meant to be remembered forever. They exist to adjust direction. Tonight, as I write this, I don't feel victorious. And I don't feel bitter. I simply understand something more clearly. A person's worth is not defined by where they stand, but by how they treat the people who help them stand there. If you've ever been diminished by someone you love, remember this. Don't shrink yourself to fit at a table where you aren't respected. Build your own table, and when you can, invite those who deserve a seat. If this story made you reflect, consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like, and sharing it with someone who may need to hear it. Not to defend me, but to remind each other that kindness is never weakness, and self-respect is not arrogance. It's a necessary boundary.